This is Unit 5.5, talking about nervous tissue. I have an image of a neuron in the outline here, and you can see the neuron has a main body to it, and there's a nucleus, there's the axon and dendrites. Nervous tissue, the purpose of it is for communication, and we tend to think of it as communication from cell to cell. The neuron is just the general nerve cell. There are different types of nerve cells. I won't get into those in this discussion. Again, if you take a later class such as anatomy, physiology, perhaps a psychology class or a physiological psychology class, you might cover those. The dendrites actually get their name from the Greek word for tree, dendron. And if you look at these, the way they're branched out from the main body, it's hard to see in this picture, they do look somewhat like branches of trees. The axon is shown over here in the image. The dendrites carry stimulus to the main cell body. So they'll pick up stimuli and they'll carry those in, direct those towards the cell body, and the axon directs the stimulus or the impulse away from the cell body. I could probably spend several days talking about the nervous system. There are some classes that cover the nervous system and spend an entire semester over the nervous system. There's a lot to it. There's the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, the way they act, the way stimuli are picked up, the synapses and the way chemicals are transferred from one cell to the next, picked up for a stimulus. This is just a very general overview, and you can go on and read those things for yourselves. The organ systems, that's something that's covered in Chapter 20 of the text, if you happen to have the text. I have organ systems shown here. Oftentimes in my face-to-face classes I tell stories with the different systems. The integumentary system includes skin, that also includes fingernails, toenails, hair. That's all part of the integumentary system. The skeletal system would be bones that provide the supporting framework. The respiratory system would be from the mouth and nose down through the lungs. Muscular system, most of the muscle we think of would be the skeletal muscle. There would be smooth muscles that I've talked about. You find those in blood vessel walls, in the walls of the intestine, of the digestive system to help move food through it, in the eyes that cause the iris to enlarge, or actually will cause it to shrink as they constrict and the pupil becomes smaller. You don't even have to think about that. Just when your eyes are exposed to light, they automatically shrink. The digestive system runs from mouth to anus, and it's somewhere between about 25 to 30 feet tall in an adult. When I talk about the digestive system, it reminds me of a story my high school biology teacher told me. I understood that it was an experiment one of the students did at the university where she attended and earned her bachelor's. It was here in Illinois. It was probably back in the 1960s, maybe early 70s. The student decided he was going to measure the length of his digestive system from mouth to anus. So he got a ball of string, and he took one end of it and started swallowing it. And he just swallowed it until eventually the end came out of his anus. And at that point, he cut the other end of the string from the ball at his mouth. And he went ahead and swallowed the string, and he allowed it to pass. And eventually, when he laid it out, it was somewhere between 25 and 30 feet in length, somewhere around 25, pretty close to it. So interestingly, it was about the length that one would guess it to be in an adult human. I didn't ask the teacher, but I wondered later what he did for hygiene with that string that had passed through his digestive system. I don't know if he put it in a baggie or stuck it in his pocket or what. Probably wouldn't have helped his day out if he had it dangling down his pant leg and somebody stepped on it. The urinary system involves the kidneys that are filtering out the blood and separating the waste out of the bloodstream and directing those to the urinary bladder and then eventually out through the urethra. The endocrine system, interestingly, the thymus is not shown here, and usually we think of that as part of the endocrine system, but it is shown in the lymphatic system. I'll just mention the thymus. That is larger in small mammals, young mammals, than it is in older mammals. So if you were to butcher a calf, the thymus would be larger in the calf relative to its size than what it would be in an adult. When I was in my undergrad years, the professors would gather thymus glands from the butcher, and we would use that to extract DNA. It was a part of the calf that generally wasn't used for consumption, so that's why they gathered it. The endocrine system involves the pituitary gland in the brain. Many of you are probably aware that if the pituitary gland is somehow affected, if it's overstimulated, a person will grow to oversized height and size in general. And if it's understimulated, a person might suffer from a type of dwarfism. It also includes the thyroid gland, the pancreas, the adrenal glands, and the sex organs also. And those affect development and affect a person at different times during their life, depending on when they're turned on and when they're turned off. The cardiovascular system, I've already mentioned a little bit about that, and don't have a whole lot to say about the male or female reproductive systems, but it does bring up another story. The same high school biology teacher I had mentioned that before she came to our high school to teach full-time, she did some substitution work, and she was at a high school further north in Illinois doing some subbing, and she noticed that this last name kept showing up very frequently in the role. And so she wondered about it and asked somebody and said, what's the deal with this last name? It's very popular in this school. And somebody told her, well, there's a farmer, and he has a very large farm, and he has 2 sons, and he told his sons, whichever one of you has the most children inherits everything. And at that time, when she was subbing, I think each son was at 17 children, and they were still going. We generally don't think of humans as having great reproductive potential as compared to other organisms, but there are cases where some women have had 19 children and more in some cases. Homeostasis. When you think of homo or homeo, that means the same. Stasis, conditions. The idea of homeostasis is that organisms try to maintain equilibrium. They try to maintain homeostasis, constant conditions. A good example, one of the ways that we measure the health in humans is to take their temperature. And we just think about the normal body temperature under the tongue as being 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a given. And we use that as a measure of health. If there's an increase in temperature, we consider that the person very possibly has an infection or something else that's going on that needs looked into. If a person increases their activity, physical activity, it tends to increase the temperature, but our body has mechanisms in place to try to maintain constant body temperature. So we'll start to perspire. And as we perspire and that moisture evaporates off of our body, it will carry heat with it because it requires energy for water to go from a liquid state to a gaseous state. That energy is pulled from the body and it cools the body. And that's one of the reasons why we perspire, especially in the summer. And especially in the Midwest where there's higher humidity, we have to sweat even more for that water to evaporate. At some other time I might talk about negative feedback and positive feedback. That comes into play with homeostasis, but I probably won't do that now, and I'll probably end with this being the last video unless I think of things to add later. Hope you do well on the test.